Okay. How's everyone doing?
Very good.
Good. Okay. So, our subject today is light and easy and Thanksgiving-y. I know in Canada you already had your Thanksgiving, so this is our Thanksgiving here, but pumpkins are still in the air. So we're going to do this really very classic drawing today, and since the subject is quite simple and forgiving.
I can
Hey,
hear
Carol.
yours.
Hi, good morning.
We will be able to really fine tune some of the shading. So the first thing I want to do is I want to show you just some different pencils and what they will do in terms of shading. So can we spotlight the iPad? Is it spotlighted? Can you see the iPad? Okay. So this one is actually done with just plain regular pencil, like the school pencils. So that pencil is called an HB pencil, or, number 2, just your basic. They might look fancier if you're buying it from an art store like this, but it's an HB. Okay, so that is your just very, very regular pencil. What I also used here is I used a paper stump, which basically is just rolled up paper. And what it does, it can smooth out little areas. One of the reasons I don't talk about these a lot or, bring them out too often is that it's very easy to get carried away and overblend your drawing, and then it'll make your drawing look blurry, and you will use a lot of fine detail. So we're going to talk about this a little bit more. And actually, I put this on suggested art supplies. I just sent Justin a list. It should be coming out soon. And by no means are those things that you have to buy. They're just some of the watercolors I talked about last time, and this paper stump, and as far as drawing, and these come in all different sizes. They're like $1 or $2 depending on the size, and you can sharpen it kind of like a pencil or with a knife. It's a great little tool. So that's the first one. That's what I use, just regular pencil. This one was done with a B pencil, and B is for bold. So this pencil is a 5B. So they go from 2 to 10. So this one is kind of in the middle, and the B pencil is kind of soft. It's a little bit more creamy. It doesn't give you a very fine tip like a regular pencil would. So fine detail is a little challenging with this. You can still do it, but it has a totally different effect. And for example, this is kind of the same pencil, but it's kind of a chunky pencil, and this is good for big drawings. And then I did one with a colored pencil like this, just a black. And I like to use this kind of for quick. So this one is kind of taking sketch form, just to show you kind of the different things that you can do. The main difference between this black pencil and all the other pencils that you might use is that this is actually a true black. So your darkest color will actually go black. When you're using pencil, it's lead, and your darkest dark is not going to go black. So you want to be mindful when you're arranging your tones, and know that even as hard as you press, you're not going to get a black. You're only going to get a very dark gray. So that's just the nature of graphite and pencils. And over here, I just have a simple layout of how you can start it. The layout is extremely simple, and forgiving. If one is off to the side, then that is totally fine. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to work with just a regular pencil today. It's a very bright day, so I'm getting a lot of light in here, so it should be quite easy to see. I kind of lost my reference here. Okay.
Turn that light out.
Okay. Now I have my pumpkins. Okay, so for our pumpkins, we have 4 pumpkins. We have one big one, and then we have the 3 smaller ones. So to me, the layout almost looked like we have a triangle here, and then we have a triangle here. That's kind of what it feels like in terms of the composition. So also what you want to think is you want to think about your paper. You can see in your reference that there's kind of like a line where the foreground meets the background. And that way you can kind of decide where your big pumpkin is going to sit. I would start with the big pumpkin because it's occupying the most space. So it's close to the right, closer to the right than it is to the left. So, and it's a little bit, crosses over the center line. So that's where I'm going to place it. So the shape of the pumpkin, it's basically a sphere, but you want to think of it as being squashed at the top and squashed at the bottom. So it's a little bit flattened. And one of the things that's going to help your pumpkin look like a pumpkin and not like something else like an apple or a tomato is showing the weight of the pumpkin. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more. You can actually suggest, you know, lightness or the weight of an object with the shadows and the lines that are underneath the object. Okay, so I'm going to just put a very basic sphere shape, kind of squatted. Okay, again, this only needs to be light enough for you to be able to see it. So it has a little bit of breathing space here, and it has a little bit of breathing space up here so I can put the stem. So now I'm going to go to the composition of the 3 pumpkins. They're very close in size. So I'm going to start, this one looks like it might be a little bit bigger, and I'm trying to see where it sits. The top of it just covers a little bit of the bottom. I'm going to go just a little bit darker than I want so you can see it clearly. Okay. And then the one next to it, almost just tucks slightly behind it. And of course, so this one is going to be a little bit higher. I'm drawing the whole sphere just to kind of show you where they would sit. And then we've got the one that has the slightly more Cinderella pumpkin shape, and it's lighter in color over here. And it just crosses over this one just a little bit over this one. And it kind of just goes out just a little bit more than this one over here. Okay, so now I know that everything fits. If you went too big, you can just erase it and just, you know, tuck them in a little bit closer together. I'm going to sprinkle some of these leaves. So I'm just going to draw just kind of the outer shape of them. You don't have to put them all, but they kind of make a nice composition. I like these over here because they kind of just sneak onto the pumpkin. I'm just using loose lines. Okay. So the next thing I'm going to do is I want to find their centers, and I'm going to put in the stems. And I really like the stems on this picture because they all go in different directions. They almost have like their own personalities or poses. This is like a vintage poster that I found, and I just really like how it was laid out. And, you know, even that background, that kind of those swirls and just the texture in between, I thought it made a pretty composition. Okay, so we know where the center of a pumpkin is when you're looking at it, you know, from the top, which would be kind of in the middle. But because we're looking at them kind of like to the side a little bit, we are going to just place where we see that stem starting. So on this big pumpkin, it starts kind of towards the top and kind of in the middle. So I'm just going to mark that. On the one under, This one, we're seeing it a little bit more, just a little bit lower. So I'm just doing the dip where those stems would be. And on this one down here, we're seeing it more kind of from the top because it's closer to us. So it's a little, it hangs a little bit lower. It's almost in the center. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we're just going to draw the overall shape. So on the top one, and what would be really fun to do when you're drawing something simple like this is to really just accentuate, celebrate, and exaggerate those little dips and dents that you see and just give it a little bit more flair. So over here, I can see that there's a little bit of a dip kind of leading to the stem. The line goes out and it just curves just slightly to the right. And you can exaggerate that a little bit. I'm going to go to the other side. There's a little dip that's a little bit more shallow than the one right across from it. A little contour. And then the top seems to be a little bit jagged. So I put in the basic shape. I'm going to go to this one. And this one has a really nice bend to it. So I'm going to start with the left. I'm just going to, and it crosses over and it overlaps onto this big pumpkin over here. And then the other side. And, you know, don't guess it according to this. Make sure that you do look at your reference. And then the right side is a little bit higher. I put that down. This one has kind of a full bend to it. So I'm going to start with the left side. And what you can do, you can see the dark shadow here, and that's kind of helping to actually see that shape, almost like a cane shape. Okay. Then I'm going to work on the other side, and notice all of the stems start heavier at the bottom. And if this were a longer stem, they would all kind of thin out and be a lot slimmer at the tops. Okay, a little bit of that jagged edge. This one has kind of a long stem for the size, has some nice curves in it. And you can look at this one over here to kind of decide where this one would start. And I can see that it starts just a little bit more slightly to the left. And it curves to the right, and then it curves to the left. Again, going from the bottom, there's a little dent here. And then it starts kind of thinning out. And what we have is we see a little bit of the other side. So this is going to fold. And then we see a little bit of the other side. And this will really show with the shading. Okay. So I do have all of my pumpkins. Okay. Carol, do you mind muting yourself because it's just it's causing some echo? Thanks. Okay, I think that's it. And okay, if you're not muted, can you mute yourself? It just causes a lot of background noise in here. Okay, thanks. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is we are going to section the pumpkins. So you can see that they have like these segments and divisions, okay? So what you want to think is all the lines are actually going to lead into the stem, and at the bottom, imagine that they're going to go into that little space that's going to be in the middle. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with the ones that look the most obvious to me. Now, don't make these lines too thick, otherwise it's going to look like the pumpkins has slits in it. What you want to do is you're going to create a line that is going to look just like a small indentation. And it doesn't have to be a steady line. So I'm actually going to take my pencil and I'm just going to break down kind of put a line that's you know, kind of just broken up a little bit. And what I like to do is I don't like to work on them in a row. I kind of like to pace myself. And so I kind of start with just doing a few scattered around. That way they don't all lean into a certain direction. It just helps me keep tabs on them. I'm going to put this one over here. So depending on where they are, just kind of notice the angle. So the ones that are facing you are going to be just slightly more straight. As they move away from you, they're going to be more curved because they are at an angle to you. And again, I'm not going to be counting the sections. So, you know, just kind of draw what you see or what hits you the most. So again, I'm using kind of soft lines. They're not completely straight. You can break them up a little bit. Just they'll actually look more natural that way. Again, I'm going to go to the back. And see, they're going to start kind of wrapping around towards the back. And then like over here where there's a highlight, we're not really seeing that line. It's very blurred. So we're not going to put them. Okay. So I'm going to go to the one under it. The one under it, they're kind of very blurred out, but we do see a few. So always start them up where the stem is. And for this, I'm just kind of going to use a shaded line because they're not very defined. And then some of them, you know, like you see them more clearly at the bottom than you do at the top. And this one to the left, we can see the ones on the left are a little bit more obvious. Again, kind of broken up lines work best so you don't get too much sharpness. So for all of this, I'm using the tip of the pencil because I'm trying to get line. I'm not really doing any shading yet. Shading, you want to use mostly the side of your pencil. That's a little sharpening. Always try to keep, you know, two pencils when I'm working and I don't want to have to sharpen, or you can sharpen both ends. I know some people don't like to do that, but I tend to do that quite a bit. Okay, so we're going to go, this one is fun to section. So this one, it has a lot more kind of curves than the others. So I'm actually going to create the lines and also put in the curve that I'm seeing at the top of the pumpkin. And I can already see that this pumpkin needed to sit a little bit lower. So I'm adding that line. So what I'm doing is I'm putting in the sections and I'm also adjusting the shape. So again, my lines are not completely sharp. Okay, so I have the pumpkins sectioned. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to section the stems. Okay, so I'm going to start with this big one over here. And again, whenever you work on something, always work on it past its start. So I'm going to start with where the grooves start, and I'm going to start darkening a little bit because it's going to start adding some depth. And I'm going to start with kind of the line that looks the most clear to me. So remember, all the sectioning that's going to happen in the stem is going to follow the contours of the stem. So you're not going to have a straight line within this stem. If you put in a straight line, it's immediately going to flatten it. Okay, and you don't have to put in all of the sectioning, just anything that pops out to you. See, start it kind of past and always go beyond. So what I'm doing is I'm just darkening a little bit, going around the edges. And over here, I'm seeing just some slight sectioning. I'm going to go to the bottom and just put in those little dents. You can already see how much three-dimensional quality I'm getting just by darkening those grooves that kind of sit. They're showing that kind of that thump in the pumpkin. Okay, this one over here has a really nice strong shadow on the left, so I'm going to put that in. And again, you know, I'm using mostly the tip of the pencil because I'm trying to do some sharp lines. We'll use the side once we start softening a little bit more. And this section over here, again, follow the contours of the stem that you put in. And again, you know, if you're not happy with how the stem looks, you can fix it while you're adding the sections. You can fix it while you add the shading. Do this one over here. I'm going to do that strong groove in here. Okay. And then this one at the bottom. So again, this one at the bottom, we can see that it's kind of curving and then turning like the other way. It has a twist to it. So I'm going to start with that key part that is showing that twist. So I'm going to start high up here and just follow that dark line. You can see at first the dark line is to the outside, and now because this is twisting, that dark line is kind of going to the inside. And then it fades out. And we have some small sectioning in here. Okay, so again, I'm just doing some line work. I haven't put in any shading yet. We can just shape some of these leaves a little bit. I like these over here. And what I'm doing also is I'm just kind of sectioning them. So basically I'm putting in the dark lines that I'm seeing. And wherever you're not seeing them, just don't put them. Just kind of seeing some veins and some little sharp edges. Some of them you see some stems. And this one we see that little stem. So, you know, just like any other medium that you use to draw or paint with, you want to make sure that you don't go with the full and maximum darkness until you know that everything is where it needs to be. You like the shapes, you like them against each other. And I would say I start going darker as I start to finalize the piece or as I start to really get deep into detailing. Okay, so now we're going to talk a little bit about shading. So there's so many different techniques that we can use for shading. So I'm just going to kind of show you just a few things. We've talked about this before. So the best kind of shading you will get. So when you're drawing, you're drawing your pumpkin, you're using kind of the tip or just a slight slant to your pencil. Now, when you want to shade is volume and it's mass. So if you're going to use the tip of your pencil, it might take you a very long time to do that. So if you use the side, which means you're going to be holding it kind of like directly over your paper, and you're going to be using the side. What I like to do is I like to create a big side with a knife, so that way you can get a really big side, or those electric pencils, they will give you a nice big side to work with. Okay, so this is kind of just basic shading where I'm going back and forth. Now, if I wanted this to be a little bit smoother, I can go in a circular motion. See, kind of my hand is going, my arm is going, and try to avoid doing this with just your wrist. Try to engage your whole arm. That way you can draw longer, and you really want to avoid any pressure on just your wrist. Try to let your arm and your back kind of hold that for you. So you can see you're getting a little bit more of a smoother shading. And this is just basic classic shading. And that's what we're going to be doing today. Again, you can go back and forth. And also it depends on your paper, if it's smooth or textured. If your paper is textured, then the strokes are going to show more easily. So I'm going to show you what the paper stump will do. So we've got this shading over here, and this, you can just go in and kind of just blend in your pencil marks. I'll show you over here. See? Now, you want to make sure that you don't do this everywhere, and that you don't rely on it, and that you're using it in a directional fashion. You don't want to just go and start blending everything. So if you're working on something rounded, make sure that you use it in that motion. So this is just a nice little tool to just give it a little bit more polish. One thing I like about this, and I probably use it more often for that purpose, is I kind of like to just take it after I've done something, or sometimes I'll just rub some pencil on the side, pick it up, and then I can do just some really light shadows. And this works really well when you're doing, something like portraits, and you're trying to use very, very light lines. And again, a substitute for this is also your fingers can do the same job. You just have to be aware that your hands do have a little bit of oil on them, especially those of us that are constantly using lotion like I am, because I wash my hands. I mean, not COVID related, but as an artist, I'm always washing my hands, even more so now. So you can use your fingers for that. You can also use a Q-tip. You can use a tissue. You can use anything. This, just because it has that compression, you see it's kind of hard. It will just give you a lot of control. So that's a nice tool to use. So again, we're just going to do classic shading. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with giving each one of these pumpkins just an overall kind of slight shade to give us something to work with. I think that this one over here, I'm not going to do that because it's almost white. And on the other pumpkins, I'm going to do my highlights, my very light areas, by using an eraser and picking that up. Okay, but also if you have a very light area, then you can avoid doing that shading. So I'm going to make sure I have a nice long tip. So again, I want to go with directional shading. So I'm kind of doing it. And again, I'm not going too dark, so I'm just giving this an overall, just try to do it in the direction that you feel the pumpkin is shaped. So over here, I'm just doing more of a curved motion. So again, I'm using the side, and this does not have to be steady. It does not have to be everywhere, because this is going to be all kind of layered and added to. Sorry about, I don't know how that happened. Okay. So over here on this side, I'm going to go a little bit easier because this seems to be a lighter area, but it still does have I'm just going just a little bit lighter. And again, shade with your arm rather than your wrist. It'll just give you a lot more control. Okay, so I've got this first one. This one over here seems to have a very similar color to it. So I'm also going to give it just a quick shaded layer, again, using the side. Okay, and this one over here is just a notch lighter, but it does have a deep shadow kind of to the left. And like I told you, I'm going to leave this one white, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to give a little bit of shading to what would be kind of greenish segments, greenish kind of spots on it, or sometimes they're orange. So I'm using the side because I don't want to have any strong lines. Okay, so now I have all my areas kind of have their basic shading to them. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to identify where my deepest shadows are. Okay, and these are going to be key in this composition because it's going to help kind of bring out each pumpkin and separate them from each other. So the first shadows I'm going to do are the ones kind of where the pumpkins kind of interact with each other, where they meet, and I'm going to go right in here. See, because I have a base down, this is blending in nicely and it doesn't look that sudden. And then I can trail it out. See, as I go higher up, I'm going just a little bit lighter. And then I'm going to go a little bit deeper. Okay, so you can already see that this is creating some depth and this pumpkin is kind of moving forward. I'm going to do the shadows that are in here. And again, this is a great opportunity to kind of work on the top shape of this white pumpkin. So again, I'm using the side, kind of going with more of a circular motion because I want to get closeness in the tone and I want to get some depth. Okay, I see some up here. I can see this shadow kind of almost wraps around to the other side. And there's some on this side. And so make sure when you're doing this shading that you don't suddenly stop it. Just kind of trail it off and just go lightly because you want it to look like it's part of the pumpkin and not like a smudge on it or something. And there's a shadow right here. My pencil is starting to get noisy. That means it's time for it to sharpen. So I just want to kind of show you what happens when you do that shading and you kind of stop. It just sticks out a little bit more and it looks like it's been imposed. So just continue shading, just start going lighter and have it trail off. Again, I'm going with a circular motion. Okay, see, that's starting to look like it belongs on the pumpkin. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we are going to, of course, the putting in the shaded areas is not complete. I'm just showing you the different things that we're going to tackle, and because some of them kind of will repeat themselves. So the next thing we're going to talk about is these sections and these segments in the pumpkin and how to do them. So the first thing we know is that we want to avoid creating a sharp line. One thing that I want you to look at, so you've got your shaded area where it's, you know, the sectioning is happening. Right after it, okay, there's going to be a raise, and that raise is going to be light. So what I like to do in this case is I like to take, you know, a small eraser or a segment of an eraser. And what I'm going to do is I am going to, let me just darken this just a little bit. So right after that dark area, you're going to see kind of a thin line that is creating the highlight. Okay. So I like to do that by picking up the color. And if it feels that it needs it, you can just go a little bit around it. And again, you know, picking up with the eraser, it doesn't have to be a steady line. So now you can see so you can see that very fine kind of little highlight that I created with the eraser. If it looks too sharp or if it's not visible enough, you can just rework the pencil around it a little bit. So another thing, you know, to do over here, if you want, and if you have a paper stump or your fingers, you can just kind of do some slight blending and just, you know, don't do it everywhere because it takes away a lot of the detail that you have put into your work. Okay, so you can see how this section here now is starting to get a lot of depth in it. Maybe work that a little bit. Okay. Okay, so we're going to do one more of these just to kind of practice how to do that sectioning and the highlight. So I'm going to reinforce that line. Again, it's not a steady line. You see any little dents and curves, make sure you put them in. And then on this one over here, it kind of blends in to the shadow. If the shadow needs to be deepened, you can do that. And then for those of you that are not used to working with the side of your pencil, it might feel awkward to hold your pencil like that. So what I recommend you do is, just practice holding it, because um, I know every kindergarten teacher would disagree with me about how to hold a pencil, but I feel that everybody just has to do the grip that is comfortable with them. You see some people that kind of use more of their index. Some people, are more, and some people just like have really awkward ways. As long as it doesn't hurt your hand, then that's fine. So just practice different ways that you can hold your pencil so you can get a good side and get as much of the lead as you can onto your paper. Okay, so again, we're going back to this line over here. If you're using a really small eraser or part of it, just make sure that you clean it every once in a while. And I clean it by just going over a paper. You could even, I slice up a lot of erasers just to get the shape that I want. Of course, they do have like, erasers that are like in pencil form. Those are also nice. And there are electric erasers. I have never tried those. I just came across them today. And I think I might get one and kind of see what they do, because that just sounds fun. With all the money we've been saving on clothes and stuff, it's time to splurge on some art supplies. Okay, so I'm going to create the highlight. So I'm going to erase just above that dark area. And again, when you do that, make sure that you look at your reference, because the light is going to appear and then it's going to kind of might be a little bit less in some areas. So I'm going to take my pencil and just kind of just work around that highlight just a little bit. And while I'm here, I'm just going to rework that area a little bit, give it a little bit more shading. Again, we're using just a basic school pencil. All right, so you can see how this area is really starting to get three-dimensional quality. And I just noticed that there's just a little highlight in here. Put that in. And then I'm going to rework some of those really dark grooves in here. And if you feel that the sectioned lines need a little bit more definition or darkness, you can just go ahead and do that. Okay, so let's work a little bit on sectioning and shading the stem. So over here, we see a shadow. And again, so over here, I'm working on a small area, so I'm not really using the side because it might be too much and it might not give me the control that I need. And then it's fading as it goes higher up. It gets really deep in here. And some overall shading in here. Very light shading in here, almost like scattered shading. little bit in here. So when I see kind of scattered shading like that, I kind of just do almost like squiggles, because that's kind of what they look like to me. They look like they're just scattered around. And then I'm just going to rework these in here. So again, you would do the same thing for all the other segments with the shading that we did over here. Okay. And again, if you want to use your paper stump, just make sure that you don't use it everywhere. And, if you decide to get one, you can, rework the piece after class and just promise me, don't blend out the whole thing. I know it's tempting because it suddenly looks like so sleek and smooth. It's very easy to blend the whole thing out. So just make sure you don't do that. But it kind of helps, combine some of the lines. It just smooths them out a little bit. Okay. So let's work a little bit on, let's see. How about we do this one, and then we're going to do, if we have time for a leaf. Okay, so I just want to show you how cool this one is going to look, the one that kind of has the little bit of a twist in it. I'm going to give it some shading. And you see as it goes towards the top, it gets more of a highlight. It actually does have some highlights within. So I'm just going to take the eraser and I'm just going to lighten just some of those areas. Took off a little too much. So I'm going to go back with the pencil. And, for things like this, if you're really trying to get like very intricate detail, you can just blow up the image and look and see. But when you're first starting to lay out and sketch, you want to see it like just overall and not get too lost in the details. Okay, so again, this is kind of the defining line. It starts out on the edge and then it kind of goes onto the inside, and that's what's going to help it show that it's twisted. I'm just going to go with a little bit and do some of those little dots. They could kind of almost look like they have slightly angular, almost like little pixels, little squares. And see, you really want to kind of just celebrate those little curves that you see, like this one here. It's really, taking it from a pumpkin to a really pretty pumpkin. And what I did on the more finished pieces is on the background, I just kind of created a slight texture with just some hatching, just to show that they're sitting on, wood or a table, just to help bring them out a little bit more. Oh, where's this light coming from? Okay. Okay, I don't think I can really control this light. Okay, okay, that's weird. Let me just move this a little bit. Sorry about that, got a big burst of light. So it's a very, very bright day today. Okay. Oops. Okay. All right. So just a little bit of work on the leaves, and I think we're almost out of time. So just for the leaves, what I would do is I would just give them some shading. And at the tips, I would give them some sharpness. And really just see where they kind of taper off. And then put in some of the veins. And that way, so that's kind of a little bit of what I did to the leaves, showing you up close detail in the pumpkin. And that stem. So again, just one final thing, when you start finalizing, pay very close attention to the lines that are underneath the pumpkins where you can see them. And that's really going to help show, because the heavier the object, the stronger the lines are going to be underneath that object, because they don't leave any room for any light to get in. So just notice, put a light object on a table and then put something heavy and look at that, what is called the tension line, which is the line that gets created underneath an object. So you will see with the pumpkins that those lines, I think already just putting that has really helped give it a little bit more pumpkin shape. You can see that over here. And then here at the bottom, and make sure that you do follow the specific shape that that line has. And there we have it. There's our pumpkins. Okay, so I'm just going to go back kind of. So this is the one I created earlier. Again, same thing with pencil. And then this one was with the B pencil, just a little bit of a smoother pencil. And this is kind of sketch form with the colored pencil. So let's see. I know we're kind of almost out of time. Does anyone have any questions? You can unmute yourself. Anyone have any questions for me? Can you unmute? Good. Do we have like a few minutes, Melissa?
Yeah, we have a couple more minutes. That's fine.
Okay. All right. So do anyone want to show me what they have? Okay. Very nice, Susanna. Oh, Marlene, that looks great. Good. Very good. Sharon? Nice. Noera? Ooh, very nice. Kina?
I'm not done mine.
Okay. Carol? Wow, beautiful. Oh, Melissa, I love it when Melissa draws. That looks great. These are really pretty. Put them at your Thanksgiving table. So, these look awesome. We are going to meet next Wednesday. I figured that most of us are not cooking at the scale that we typically would. So hopefully you can join, take a break from your preparations. I'm going to be doing it on my own without Melissa. So hopefully we will be live and there. So please send me the final results. And again, this would be a really pretty color project. So if you want to look up some, pumpkin paintings, just those oranges and golds, they're a lot of fun to work with. So let me know if you have any questions later, and I will see you next week.